Narrator. Listen. That sound, low, relentless, like the earth itself clearing its throat, is the sound of 2.5 million Soviet soldiers. It rolls across the flat plains of Brandenburg, through birch forests still dusted with late spring frost, and into the shattered streets of a city that once called itself the capital of a 1,000-year empire. It is April 16, 1945. Berlin is dying. In the streets below, an old man pushes a cart piled with his life's belongings: a clock, a photograph, a folded quilt. A girl, perhaps 12 years old, runs past him with a bucket of water. Somewhere a baby cries in a basement. The sound of the artillery grows louder, and 60 feet beneath the Reich Chancellery garden, beneath the rubble, beneath the roots, beneath the cold clay of a nation in ruins, one man sits in a concrete room and stares at a map. The map shows armies that no longer exist. It shows a Germany that is already gone. But the man staring at it does not know this, or will not accept it. His hands tremble. His eyes are flat, gray, and certain. His name is Adolf Hitler. He has 11 days left to live. Narrator. To understand the bunker, you must first understand the dream. It began in the bitter winter of 1919, in a beer hall in Munich, where a failed Austrian painter with a gift for rage discovered that he could make audiences weep and tremble and roar. His name was Adolf Hitler. His message was ancient and terrible, that Germany had been stabbed in the back, betrayed by Jews, by communists, by the weak, and that only he could restore the nation's glory. He was laughed at. He was imprisoned. He wrote a book. He waited. By January 30th, 1933, he was Chancellor of Germany. By 1938, he had remade Europe's map without firing a single shot. By 1941, German armies stood at the gates of Moscow, in the deserts of North Africa, on the banks of the Volga. The dream had become an empire stretching from the English Channel to the Caucasus Mountains. But empires built on terror carry the seeds of their own destruction. The turning point came at Stalingrad in the winter of 1942 and 1943. 290,000 German soldiers encircled, ground down, frozen, starved. Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered on February 2, 1943, the first German field marshal ever to be captured alive. In Berlin, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, declared 3 days of national mourning, and for the first time ordinary Germans began to whisper the word they had been forbidden to think: *defeat*. The years that followed were a slow, agonizing withdrawal. Kursk, Kiev, Warsaw, the liberation of Paris, the bloody catastrophe of the Bulge. By January 1945, Soviet armies under Marshal Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Ivan Konev had crossed the Vistula River and were surging toward Germany's eastern border. In the west, American and British forces had crossed the Rhine. Germany was caught in a vice, and the vice was closing. Hitler retreated into his maps and his fantasies. He moved to the Führerbunker on January 16, 1945, a reinforced concrete shelter buried beneath the Reich Chancellery in central Berlin. 18 rooms, diesel generators, a conference room barely large enough to hold a table. The man who had once commanded the armies of a continent would spend his final weeks in a space smaller than a modest apartment. Around him gathered the last court of the Third Reich. Eva Braun, his companion of 13 years, arrived in February against his wishes, refusing to leave him. Goebbels and his wife Magda brought their 6 children, Helga, Hilda, Helmut, Holda, Hedda, and Haida, ranging in age from 4 to 12. Martin Bormann, Hitler's secretary, efficient and reptilian, managed access to the Führer and schemed for what remained to be schemed for. Albert Speer, the architect who had designed Hitler's dreams in stone and steel, visited and lied, telling his master what he wanted to hear. Outside, Germany collapsed. In the streets of Berlin, the authorities were posting notices calling on every able-bodied male to defend the capital. Boys of 14 and 15 drilled with rifles too heavy for them to carry. Old men with armbands marked *Volkssturm*, the People's Storm, were issued anti-tank weapons and told to stop Soviet armor. The regular military commanders knew the truth. Berlin could not be held. The city had approximately 85,000 troops, a few hundred tanks, and limited artillery to face a Soviet force of over 2 million men, 6,000 tanks, and more than 7,000 aircraft. The generals knew. Hitler refused to. On the evening of April 15, 1945, German intelligence confirmed what the Thunder already announced. The final Soviet offensive was coming at dawn. Zhukov's forces massed along the Oder River 40 miles east of Berlin. Marshal Konev's armies were poised to the south. The trap was set. The last battle for Europe's most infamous city was about to begin. Narrator, April 16, 1945, 3 o'clock in the morning. The Seelow Heights, 40 miles east of Berlin. The Oder River Valley lies in darkness, thick with mist rising off the floodplain. Then, without warning, 10,000 Soviet artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The sound is not thunder. Thunder ends. This does not end. For 35 minutes, the barrage falls on the German lines, shells arriving at the rate of one every yard of front, every second. The earth moves. Men lose their minds before they lose their lives. Marshal Georgy Zhukov has ordered his tank commanders to switch on their searchlights, 143 battlefield searchlights, to blind the defenders and illuminate the advance. It is a dramatic gesture, and in the fog and dust of the bombardment, it is largely useless. The beams catch nothing but smoke and confusion. But the attack rolls forward anyway. The German defenders on the heights have had just enough warning to pull back from the first line of trenches. When the Soviet infantry advance through the smoke, they find the first positions empty. The second and third lines hold. The battle for the Seelow Heights becomes a nightmare of close-quarters fighting. Men killing each other in trenches, in farmhouses, in apple orchards just coming into first blossom. For 4 days the heights hold. Zhukov, furious at the delay, commits his tank armies early, a decision that creates a monstrous traffic jam on the road behind him. Stalin calls twice to goad him. To the south, Konev's armies are advancing faster. The race to Berlin has become a competition between Soviet marshals. The heights fall on April 19th. 30,000 Soviet soldiers are dead. The road to Berlin is open. Narrator, April 20th, 1945, Hitler's 56th birthday. In the Führer bunker, a small ceremony is held. Generals and ministers file through to congratulate their Führer. The footage that survives from this day is among the most studied in history. Hitler moving along a line of Hitler Youth boys in the Chancellery Garden, patting cheeks, squeezing shoulders. His movements are slow, trembling. His left hand shakes uncontrollably. He looks 20 years older than his age. The boys look 12. Some of them are 12. General Hans Krebs, his new chief of staff, presents the situation map. Soviet forces are 40 miles from Berlin's center. Göring has fled south. Himmler is secretly negotiating with the Allies through a Swedish intermediary. The Reich is disintegrating at every seam. Hitler listens. He announces that he will remain in Berlin. Most of those assembled understood what this meant. The senior staff begin their own quiet retreat, southward, westward, anywhere but here. Admiral Karl Donitz departs for the north. Göring leaves for Bavaria. In ones and twos the court empties. Eva Braun stays. Goebbels stays. His wife and children stay. The 6 Goebbels children decorate a small Christmas tree they have found in the bunker. Helga, the eldest at 12, already understands something is wrong. She has been seen crying when the others are not looking. Narrator, April 25, 1945. Soviet and American forces meet at Torgau on the Elbe River, cutting Germany in two. On the same day, the encirclement of Berlin is completed. Soviet forces from the north and south link up west of the city. 2 million soldiers, 6,000 tanks. Berlin is an island now. There is no way in. There is no way out. Inside the city, the battle is medieval in its savagery, street by street, building by building, floor by floor. The Soviets have learned the lessons of Stalingrad, that in urban warfare, armor is vulnerable without infantry, and infantry is vulnerable without armor. Together, in improvised assault groups, they crawl through the rubble. German defenders, soldiers, SS men, Volkssturm, children, fight from prepared positions in every cellar and behind every shattered wall. The Berlin subway tunnels, the U-Bahn become both refuge and killing ground. Tens of thousands of civilians shelter underground. SS engineers flood several tunnels to prevent Soviet flanking movements, with terrible consequences for those sheltering within. Narrator, April 22nd. The Daily Situation Conference. Hitler stands at the map table. He is waiting for the report on Operation Steiner. the counterattack he has ordered by SS General Felix Steiner, whose forces he believes are preparing to drive south and relieve Berlin from the north. He has been planning around this counterattack for days. He has issued orders built upon it. General Alfred Jodl clears his throat. Steiner has not attacked. Steiner's force barely exists. The divisions Hitler has been moving on maps have already been destroyed or scattered. There is no counterattack. There has never been a counterattack. What follows is described by every eyewitness the same way. Hitler's face goes white, then red. He begins to shout, not the controlled, theatrical rage of his speeches, but something else, something that frightens even men who have been at war for 6 years. He screams that he has been betrayed by the Wehrmacht, betrayed by his generals, betrayed by everyone. He declares that the war is lost. He announces that he will die in Berlin. Then he sits down. The outburst lasts over an hour. When it ends, Hitler is calm, almost peaceful. He has made his decision, and decisions, even terrible ones, have a way of quieting the mind. He will not leave the bunker. He will not surrender. He will die here, in the ruins of his capital, and rob the Soviets of their prize. Narrator, April 28th. The Soviets are 3 blocks from the Reich Chancellery. In the bunker, Hitler receives a BBC radio report. Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Holocaust, has been secretly negotiating surrender with Count Bernadotte of Sweden. Himmler, his most loyal servant, his asterisk Treuer Heinrich asterisk, has betrayed him. Hitler's reaction is volcanic. He orders Himmler's arrest. He executes Hermann Fegelein, Eva Braun's brother-in-law and Himmler's representative in the bunker in the Chancellery garden. And then, with Soviet shells falling close enough to shake the concrete overhead, he marries Eva Braun. The ceremony is brief. A minor official of the city administration is found to conduct it. They sign the register. A small celebration is held. Champagne, sandwiches, reminiscences. Eva Braun becomes Eva Hitler for approximately 40 hours. April 29th. Hitler dictates his last will and testament. He blames the Jews for the war. He names Admiral Donitz as his successor. He expels Göring and Himmler from the party. He appoints Goebbels as Reich Chancellor, a title that will last 1 day. The document is signed and dispatched through Soviet lines by courier. 3 couriers sent, since 2 are expected to be captured or killed. April 30th, 1945. The Soviets have reached the edges of the Tiergarten, the great park at the heart of Berlin. Soldiers from the 150th Rifle Division are fighting their way toward the Reichstag, that great neo-Renaissance monument to German democracy, long since gutted and symbolically hollow. They have been given a flag, a Soviet red banner, and ordered to plant it on the roof before midnight. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, in a small private study off the main corridor of the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler places a Walther PPK pistol to his right temple and pulls the trigger. Eva Hitler dies beside him, a cyanide capsule between her teeth. Their bodies are carried to the Chancellery garden above, soaked in petrol, and burned. Soviet shells fall 50 yards away. Berlin's garrison commander, General Helmuth Weidling, does not learn of the suicide until the following morning. At 10:50 p.m. on April 30th, Red Army Sergeants Mikhail Yegorov and Meliton Kantaria raise a Soviet flag over the Reichstag. The image, captured by photographer Yevgeny Kaldai, will become the defining image of the European war. 2 exhausted men, a flag snapping in the smoke-heavy wind, the ruined skyline of Berlin below. Narrator, May 2, 1945. Berlin surrenders. General Weidling signs the capitulation order at 6 o'clock in the morning. He broadcasts it over the remaining radio transmitters. German soldiers, in 1s and 2s, then in streams, emerge from basements and broken buildings and lay down their weapons. Some weep. Some stare at nothing. Some run. The battle has lasted 17 days. Soviet casualties, approximately 81,000 dead, 280,000 wounded. German military dead, an estimated 100,000. Civilian dead in Berlin, nobody knows. Estimates range from 22,000 to 125,000. The bodies lie under the rubble for months. Some are never found. The Goebbels family is found in the bunker. Joseph and Magda Goebbels have died by suicide, but first, on the night of May 1st, they killed their 6 children. Magda administered the cyanide herself. The children were in their nightgowns. Their bodies are found arranged as if sleeping, their faces peaceful. Helga, the eldest, the one who had been seen crying, shows bruising around her jaw, suggesting she may have struggled. This detail, more than any statistic, more than any general's verdict, captures what the Third Reich was, a system that eventually consumed even those who most completely gave themselves to it. In the days following the surrender, the extent of the catastrophe becomes visible from the air. Berlin, a city of 4 million people, is approximately 35% destroyed. The inner districts are nearly uninhabitable. Water, electricity, sewage, all gone. Food stocks are measured in days. It is a medieval city overlaid with the ruins of modernity. Germany surrenders unconditionally to the Allied powers on May 8, 1945, VE Day, Victory in Europe. In cities across Britain, America, France, and the Soviet Union, people pour into the streets. They dance, they weep, they hold each other. But peace in 1945 is not the absence of suffering. It is merely the end of organized killing. The Nuremberg trials begin in November 1945. 24 senior Nazi leaders face the International Military Tribunal, charged with crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. 12 are sentenced to death. Among them, Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, Reichsmarschall Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Hermann Göring, the most senior figure in the dock, cheats the hangman. 2 hours before his scheduled execution, he bites down on a cyanide capsule hidden in a jar of pomade in his cell. Where it came from has never been definitively established. Albert Speer, Hitler's architect, receives 20 years. His performance at Nuremberg, where he claimed ignorance of the Holocaust while acknowledging responsibility for the regime, spares his life. Historians have debated ever since whether he earned that mercy. The Berlin Wall would rise 15 years later, dividing the city and the continent for another 28 years. The Cold War that replaced the hot one would last 45 years and produce its own terrors, its own brinkmanship, its own children growing up under the long shadow of a world that could end. But something had changed in May 1945, something that could not be unchanged. The world had looked at what systematic industrialized hatred could produce, had walked through Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, Auschwitz, and a word had been added to the human vocabulary that had not existed before. Genocide. A crime given a name because a crime requires a name before it can be prosecuted, before it can be remembered, before it can be prevented. The lesson was paid for in blood. Whether it was learned is a question every generation must answer for itself. Narrator. Stand in Berlin today. The city that burned in the spring of 1945 is alive again. Luminous, cosmopolitan, full of music and argument, and the ordinary grace of people going about their lives. The Reichstag has a glass dome now, transparent by design, so that citizens can look down on their parliament. The Brandenburg Gate, pockmarked with bullet holes for decades, has been restored. The wall is gone, save for a few preserved sections kept as monuments, their surfaces thick with graffiti and remembrance. Beneath the Reich Chancellery there is nothing. The bunker was partially demolished by Soviet engineers in 1947. The rest was sealed and buried when East Germany built apartment blocks over the site in the 1980s. Today, the location is marked by a small information board in a parking lot. Tourists stop there sometimes, look at the board, then look at the unremarkable asphalt beneath their feet, and try to imagine 60 feet of concrete and the man who sat inside it as a city burned above him. It is perhaps the most appropriate memorial, not grandeur, not drama, just a parking lot and a board and the absence of everything that was there. The last German World War II veteran eligible for pension died in 2022. The last Holocaust survivor with a living memory of Auschwitz is, as you watch this, somewhere in their 90s, still speaking, still insisting on being heard. Their voices are almost gone now. The generation who can say I was there, I saw it. This is what it was, is ending. What they leave behind are documents, photographs, and testimony, and choices. The choice about whether to teach this history with full honesty, the choice about whether to name what happened when we see it happening elsewhere. The choice about whether a generation that did not live through the 20th century's catastrophe will remember what that catastrophe cost. Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods. That is what Wagner called it. That is what Hitler called his final orders to destroy Germany rather than surrender it. To burn the factories, flood the mines, blow the bridges, deny the enemy a functioning nation. Albert Speer quietly countermanded most of those orders. Germany survived physically to be rebuilt. But something else burned in those last days, something that had been built over decades of propaganda and complicity and looking away. An idea burned, that the nation-state is absolute, that the leader embodies the will of the people, that some lives matter less than others, that history runs in one direction and you can choose which side you're on. Hitler died believing he had been betrayed. He had not been betrayed. He had simply reached the end of what violence and fantasy and the willingness of frightened people to follow a madman could sustain. The artillery fell silent on May 2, 1945. It has not yet been 60 years since any European alive today was born. The silence is recent. The silence is fragile. Total narration word count: approximately 3,000.